And welcome to In the 661, Youth Voices for Kern, where we discuss issues of importance to our community, but also specifically issues that affect our youth. Kim Hernandez is with the Kern County Department of Public Health. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So we want to talk about something that's popped up really bad this year, and that is valley fever. So my first question, I think, really goes to what's going on? Why are we seeing more cases this year than we have in recent years?
Right, in 2017 we saw almost 3,000 cases of valley fever here in Kern County, and it's hard to know exactly what is causing it. There's a lot of discussion about the weather. You know, obviously it's a fungus that grows in the ground, so it's very dependent on the weather to have moisture, which is when fungus grows. If you think of a mold, it likes the darkness and the moisture. And then we talk about, well, then we have these really dry summers. So if we've had lots of years with no rain, and suddenly we get some rain, all of a sudden the fungus has a chance to grow. We hit the dry months of the summer, and the fungus can blow around in the air, and we inhale that fungus, and that gets us sick. And so that's one of the pieces we think are involved in it.
And I know there's a lot of research going into it. Back when I was a TV news reporter full time, Arizona, there's universities in Arizona, because again, they have a similar climate. They have that same problem over there. There's professors over there that are studying this, right? Trying to figure out, because I don't think we fully understand the full life cycle of where it is. I know that when they were talking about it, they were saying, is it in little burrows in the ground where squirrels and rabbits, is it staying in there and then being spread potentially when they come up? Where is it growing at the root of some plants? Do we fully understand yet how this whole life cycle works for this fungus?
Not yet. The fungus is very difficult for us to really understand. It's hard for us to grow in a lab setting, and so it's hard for us to really see, you know, to figure out a lot of things with it. So a lot of it is the natural history of if we can find it in the ground and those correlations. There are a lot of people in Arizona as well as here in California. We have a professor at CSUB who's also interested in figuring out if we can tell from the vegetation on the topsoil if valley fever grows in that area. So far, we haven't been able to pinpoint anything. Lots of people are still looking at vegetation, at the rodent burrows, as well as the climate conditions, whether it's last year's rain or the year before, and things like that of what's the most predictive thing of finding the fungus in the ground. So we don't know yet.
And there is, I mean, I want to talk to you about a vaccine, because that is one way eventually, theoretically, we'll be able to prevent it. But what can you do? I mean, if I'm a teenager walking to school, and it's blowing dust, I mean, it almost feels like you can't avoid certain things here in Kern County, like the heat, number one, and number two, when it's blowing dust and wind, that there's no way of avoiding it. What can somebody do to prevent themselves from getting it?
Right. The first thing is obviously to know that we have valley fever here, and that it's always around, and it's in our county year-round, even when it's not hot summer. And to know, you know, how it grows. It grows in the soil, and so we're concerned when there is dust and
or digging too, right?
Right, digging. If there's dust blowing in the air, all of those things are ways where we can be exposed to it. So, you know, if you are a teenager walking to school and it's a dusty day, then we'd really want you to think about, well, how can you avoid inhaling that dust? And unfortunately, with the valley fever, the spores are very, very small, and so what you need is a mask, which we call it N95 rated, and so it's rated so that it doesn't let those tiny, tiny particles past it. Something like a bandana or your shirt sleeve isn't going to keep the valley fever fungus out. And so, you know, if you have to walk to school, if you have to be out when it's windy and dusty, we'd really encourage you to take those kinds of precautions. Same thing if you're going to be out where there is undisturbed soil. You know, we hear lots of stories of people who are out dirt biking or ATVing or horseback riding in places where the soil's not often disturbed, but as you go through it, you're going to kick up that dust. And to be really aware that that's another place you could come in contact with valley fever and those spores. And so if you're going to be out there, to think about those things. Obviously, if you have to dig in places, it's better if you can wet down the soil so it doesn't create as much dust. But anytime there's a lot of wind and dust, you want to be concerned that there might be valley fever in the air, and to take precautions where you can.
And the thing is, I mean, you were saying this is bad, right? We're the worst in the state, is that right now?
There are more cases diagnosed here in Kern County than any other county in the state, and that's pretty historical. It's been that way for many years, and so we kind of, you know, there's endemic where we know it's always here, but we kind of consider our county hyper-endemic because we see more cases here. So we know that it might be a product of many things. It could be because we have better awareness, we have doctors that are thinking about it more often and diagnosing it more often, or that our soil's more conducive to its growth. But all we know is at the end of the day, we have more people here reported with that illness than anywhere else in the state.
It was bad, you said, back in the 1990s as well, but it seems to be kind of cyclical. We're coming back up on a curve here.
Yeah, it tends to have a cyclical pattern, which may again have to do with weather and soil composition and things like that. Back in the 90s, we saw a lot of cases in the western part of the county, out in Taft in that area, and then those cases dropped down for several years. Over the last few years, we've seen an increase. 2017, it was 26% higher than in 2016, and it's about 3 times higher than it was a few years before. So we're on this upswing, which is why we want to talk about it more and remind people about it. We hear about valley fever a lot. A lot of us have a general sense of that it's here and what it is, but we want to make sure that people are as informed as they can be. They take precautions when they know they're going to be in situations where they might be exposed to dirt and dust, and that as these cases continue to climb, we just want to be even more vigilant about those things.
Long term, I want to get back to the thing that a lot of people have been pushing for, and that's a valley fever vaccine. There is effort and there is willpower, it seems like, even at the state level to try and get some funding behind it now. Congressman McCarthy's been working on it. What is taking so long? And I don't say that in a cynical way, but literally, what are some of the impediments or things that we're finding along the way that's making it difficult for us to find and create a vaccine against this?
One of the hardest things is that valley fever is caused by a fungus, and a fungus genetically is related very closely to the cells we have in our bodies. So it's hard to develop something that would be effective at keeping us from being sick from the fungus without giving us the full fungus and making us sick. So it's a little bit trickier than, say, with a lot of our other vaccines that are based on viruses, where you just take a little piece of the virus and our body has an immune response to it. It's hard for us to take a little piece of that fungus, have our body still recognize it, and still fight off against it without that fungus making us sick. And so a lot of people are working very hard on it, and so we're still very hopeful that in the future there will be a vaccine to prevent it.
And that would be the goal, right, is that if we could vaccinate everybody against it, even if you've lived here for a while, you would have the chance of not developing it.
Absolutely.
And you were talking too about diagnosis too. That's something you want to encourage as well. If I'm a person at home, I've been coughing for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, it may not be a cold or flu virus. People tend to feel like it's like the flu virus. It could be something more serious like valley fever.
Right, and if you have been coughing more than 2 weeks, especially if you have a high fever, you have general weakness, you're really tired, some people break out in a rash, those are all reasons to go to your doctor and to be checked out. It's a simple blood test, so it's not something that's real complicated. Most doctors routinely test for it. If you show up and say, I haven't stopped coughing, and they just say, well, let's check and make sure it's not valley fever. For most people, their illness doesn't require medication, but if it is something that does, your doctor will prescribe it for you, and the sooner you get on it, the better.
Because it can be deadly.
It can be deadly. It can move outside of your lungs to other parts of your body.
The nervous system.
Right.
And then, you're literally growing mushrooms, so to speak, inside. I hate to bring that picture, but that's what it is, a mushroom growing inside your body, and it could really make you sick.
Yeah, it can, for a small proportion of people, they can become very sick. Some people need to be taken off work or out of school. Some people need to be on medication for the rest of their lives.
Wow.
And so the earlier diagnosed, the less likely it is for it to spread. So we want people to really think about valley fever if they have that cough that won't go away, or if they're just super tired and don't know why, that it's always really good to go talk to your doctor and just ask and see, because it's something that's routinely run here in our county, and most doctors will recognize it.
Oh, great. Thank you so much, Kim, for kind of giving us an update on what's going on with valley fever.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Thank you for joining us on In the 661 Youth Voices for Kern.